Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description notes below where you will find links to anything I talk about in this video, including how to get my patterns to knit up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group, and how to support me on Patreon. Today I am revisiting a subject from a previous video. I will put a link to the old video up here, and that's why it's called This Is More Secret Language of Knitters. It was something I was thinking about, and as with all niches, we have our own language. There are things we say and terms we use that it's just assumed that other people know what we're talking about in the knitting world. And if you're a newer knitter, or if it's just something you haven't come across yet, you might be scratching your head about it, being like, I don't know what you meant by that. And these specifically, I have three things I want to talk about that are more phenomena than actual things. They're not words for things. They're word for sort of an amorphous concept, or maybe even mythology, if you will. But it's things that knitters talk about, and we use our own lingo to talk about it. And the first one is second sock syndrome. And really, what second sock syndrome is one, you get excited about making a pair of socks, right? You cast it on, you knit it, and once you've made that first sock, you know, the excitement is gone. You know, you're not newlyweds anymore. You've already been through all the paces. There's no surprises left. And motivating yourself to knit that second sock can be very, very challenging, especially for people who don't like knitting the same thing twice. Now, if you really, really want the socks, you might be able to jump right back into them, but a lot of people struggle with knitting that second sock. And second sock syndrome can also apply to other things that come in pairs, like sleeves and mittens and gloves, and pretty much anything else that you have to make two of for it to be really a functional piece of knitwear. So there are ways to get over second sock syndrome, or to kind of defeat it. One is, for people who are hardcore sock knitters, there is knitting two at a time. What you do is you use a really, really long cable and cast on both socks and knit them both at the same time, which is kind of wild. But a friend of mine who really enjoyed knitting socks actually, I think, had the best plan. And what she did to avoid second sock syndrome was she never knit two the same socks. What she would do is she would have yarn that she wanted to knit socks out of, and she would actually pick two separate patterns to knit. And she would knit the first sock with the one pattern and the second sock with a different pattern, but the same yarn. So really, they were fraternal twins, not identical twins in the sock world, but they were the same color and they were the same yarn. So unless someone is really looking pretty closely at your feet, it's going to stand up to a general glance. So she just never knit the same sock twice. She just used the same yarn to knit two different socks. Now, if they're drastically different, you might get into a little bit of it, but you know what? Who cares if your socks really match? I mean, it's not an essential world-ending kind of thing. So, knitting them two at a time, knitting two different socks with the same yarn can also defeat it, giving yourself a little treat when you finish it. Now, but one thing I want to warn you is if you leave too long between socks, then your gauge might change. So if you knit one sock and be like, oh, I'll just knit the other one later, and later turns out to be 5 years later, the odds of those socks matching are going to be fairly low. So second sock syndrome, it's something we knitters talk about, and for a lot of us it's a very real thing. Second sleeve syndrome, it's kind of stepchild, is also something. You get the one sleeve knit and you just don't want to do the other one because you've been there, done that. Okay, now the second thing I want, the phrase, or it really goes into the realm of mythology, or actually, and this is wild, I just Googled it real quick to make sure I wasn't like imagining things, and this is definitely something I've heard talked about. This actually is so ubiquitous, it has its own Wikipedia page. I couldn't believe it. I Googled this and I'm like, it's on Wikipedia? Seriously? It really surprised me. And that is the sweater curse. Dum, 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 dum. Okay, so the sweater curse is the idea that if you are in a serious relationship with another individual and you start making them a sweater, but you haven't made that relationship like official, and really the implication being married or some sort of like official partnership kind of situation. If y'all are just dating, even if it's long-term dating, that if you start knitting that person a sweater, when you give it to them, you're gonna break up. Or you might even break up before the sweater is finished. Okay, and this is the sweater curse, and the idea that you really shouldn't knit a sweater for a boyfriend or girlfriend because, you know, you don't have that commitment there. And it's just, it's funny, if you read the Wikipedia page, it says it is the belief that if a knitter gives a hand knit sweater to a significant other, it will lead to the recipient breaking up with the knitter, and also breaking up before it is even completed. And they have this thing, the belief is widely discussed in knitting publications, and some knitters claim to have experienced it. In a 2005 poll, 15% of active knitters said they experienced the sweater curse firsthand, and 41% considered it a possibility that should be taken seriously. So, the sweater curse. And it's interesting because if you read through this Wikipedia page, they actually give some really interesting rationalizations for why this might seem so. And one of them that really makes sense is it takes a long time to knit a sweater. And if your relationship isn't really established and you start knitting the sweater and it takes you a year to knit that sweater, there's a distinct possibility that between the time you start it and the time you're almost finished with it, things in your relationship might change. And I thought that one was pretty on point, but there's some really interesting. I will definitely put a link in the description below to this Wikipedia page because I think it is absolutely hilarious that there's a Wikipedia entry on the sweater curse. So I don't know if you'd heard about the sweater curse previously, but now you have, and if any of your knitter friends talk about the sweater curse, you know what they're talking about. And in that Wikipedia page, there's a little section on avoiding the curse, which I'll let you read, but it dovetails nicely into the third, and what I'm probably going to talk about the most, little bit of terminology or phrase that knitters use that might mystify non-knitters. Ergo, part of our secret language is knitworthy. Evaluating, is someone knitworthy or not? And what exactly does knitworthy mean? Is the person worthy of being the recipient of a hand knitted gift. And when knitters talk about being knitworthy, I think among knitters, it's understood what they're talking about, but maybe not so much among non-knitters. And what it is whatever you're knitting for them is going to take time and love and materials, and also a forfeiture of the time you might be using to knit something for yourself. So is a person worthy of all of this time, effort, and devotion? Are they going to be properly appreciative of and understand what it is that you are giving them? And from the knitter's point of view, it's kind of one-sided is, are they almost good enough to receive it? And things that have happened where people are not, they kind of get off the knitworthy list, is people who are annoyed that you made something by hand for them. I have heard stories about people making sweaters and items for people and then later finding it in their local thrift shop where the person has donated it. I have read stories about people who have knit someone or crocheted or crafted anyway, someone a special blanket, and then they discover that instead of using it for their couch or to swaddle their child, it was given to a dog or a cat. It was given to a pet. So it feels a little disrespectful in that, or people who just don't even acknowledge that they received it, things like that. But I think we as knitters also need to take our share of the responsibility, because a huge part of gift giving is giving the recipient something that they actually want, will value, and it will make them happy. And I think that sometimes we knitters focus too much on what we've put into it and not really stop to think if the individual we are considering gifting something to will value the things that we value in it. So some ways to figure out if someone is knitworthy, if someone will appreciate a gift of a hand knit or crocheted or quilted or whatever item, is, when you visit with them or anything, do they have other handcrafted items in their home? Is this a person who has ever invited you to go to a craft show or an art show? Do they shop on Etsy a lot? Is a handcrafted item a valued item to them? Because there are people who that isn't what they look for in something. And there's no judgment here. There's no shade here, because it's just different people like and appreciate different things. And there are some people who think that making a handmade item is just a cheapskate way of getting out of buying a real present. And you really need to suss out a person and figure out if they are going to be on that side of the teeter-totter. If they're on the, I would rather have something purchased from this nice store and you're cheaping out, then, you're not giving them something they want and they're not going to appreciate. So they definitely go into the not knit-worthy pile, but it's more about you. And did you figure out if this is something that they would want? I know that there are a lot of knitters who are in this situation where someone sees you knitting and requests an item. And for that, I have another video for you that kind of touches on this same subject, and it's called Saying No. It's okay to say no, people who request things of you. It's your responsibility. It's your ability. It's your right to turn down requests. And requests are not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about when you decide you want to give to someone a gift of something hand knit or crocheted or quilted or embroidered or woven or any of those numbers of things. Obviously, your most knit-worthy recipients are going to be other knitters, people who really understand what has gone into it. But If you have a friend who is constantly complimenting the knitted items that you have, or when you're in a group and someone else compliments something and the other person for you is like, oh, did you know she made that? She's so great. Someone who is like that is definitely going to go into the knitworthy pile. Also, in consideration for knitworthiness is how well the individual tends to care for their items. Is this someone who is going to be able to incorporate the higher level of care that a knitted piece might require? It might need to be hand washed. It might need to be washed on gentle and dried flat. So that's, and there's other considerations there. If you know it's someone who you know will appreciate it, but they don't have the time to care for it, like a new mother or a new father, someone with a new child, you can compensate for that by choosing the right yarn and materials that they will be able to give it the care level that they are able to give it. So take that into consideration. So if it's a friend of yours that you've been over to their house and they tend to leave all their laundry laying around in a basket, which no judgment there, folding clothes is annoying. But you know, you just got to evaluate whether or not the person is going to be knitworthy. And I'm trying to frame this so that knitworthy is just a category. It's not, if you're not knitworthy, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you don't fit into the category of someone who would appreciate and value a knitted gift. There's nothing wrong with not being in that category. It's just we as knitters have a responsibility to evaluate and understand our potential giftees and figure out what category they fit into, because it's just as much on us as it is on the person receiving it if we didn't take into consideration what they would want and value as opposed to just what we wanted to make for them. Because sometimes we just want to make what we want to make. And you know what? You know who the most knitworthy person is to get something you just want to make? You! Make it for yourself. There's nothing wrong with making something for yourself. So, that is my video, a little more in depth into a smaller number as in contrast to my previous secret language. I don't know if you have experience with any of these three things, second sock syndrome, the sweater curse, or knitworthiness, but I thought it would be fun to talk about. I'd love to hear any fun stories or any experiences that y'all have with any of these three little inside knitting things. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, click that like button, and if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.